A United States senator walked into court expecting to control the room with a smile and walked out in handcuffs while his daughter sobbed at the defense table. But the real shock wasn't the arrest. It was the moment a 71-year-old teacher stood up, looked the judge in the eyes, and said just 3 words that silenced the entire courtroom. If you love courtroom drama, where entitled people finally meet consequences, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because this case spiraled into one of the most explosive courtroom meltdowns you'll ever hear. For more than 30 years, this judge believed in one simple principle: the law only matters if it applies to everyone equally, not just to ordinary people, not just to the powerless, everyone. But on one freezing Monday morning in November, that belief was about to be tested in ways nobody in that courtroom could have imagined. The judge arrived just before 9 a.m., coffee in hand, expecting the usual chaos. Lawyers whispering, nervous defendants pacing, families sitting in silence, hoping for miracles. Instead, the courtroom was dead quiet, not normal quiet, the kind of silence that feels wrong the second you walk into it. And then the clerk quietly said 2 words, "Front row." The judge looked up and immediately understood why the room felt different. Sitting in the gallery was Senator Victor Caldwell, 3-term senator. Massive political influence, presidential rumors swirling around his name for years. And he wasn't sitting there like an observer. He was sitting there like he owned the building. Dark navy suit, American flag pin on his lapel, 2 aides behind him, personal attorney beside him. The posture alone told the story. This was a man who had spent decades watching doors open for him automatically. And that confidence only got worse once the judge opened the case file, because the defendant was Natalie Caldwell, his 26-year-old daughter, charged with aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, and fleeing the scene after driving into a crowded farmer's market. And that's when everything changed. The judge officially called court into session. But before the prosecutor could even begin, Senator Caldwell stood up. No permission, no respect for courtroom procedure, no hesitation whatsoever. He walked directly through the courtroom gate into the restricted area reserved for attorneys and officers of the court. The entire room froze. Even the bailiff instinctively moved forward, but the judge stopped him with 1 finger, because now this had become personal. The senator approached the bench calmly, too calmly. Then came the smile. That polished political smile people use when they're about to disguise a threat as a polite conversation. He called the judge "Your Honor," but the tone sounded more like someone addressing an employee. Then he dropped the first warning. He claimed the charges against his daughter were politically motivated, a misunderstanding, a minor traffic incident. 4 people had been injured, 1 elderly woman hospitalized. But to him, it was minor. And then came the line that made the temperature in the courtroom drop 10 degrees. The senator casually reminded the judge that he sat on the Federal Judiciary Oversight Committee. And he encouraged her to consider the implications of how the morning proceeded. No yelling, no direct threat, which somehow made it worse. Because powerful people learn very early that the most dangerous threats are the ones delivered politely. The judge slowly removed her glasses and placed them on the bench. Anyone who knew her understood exactly what that meant. The discussion was over. She told the senator to return to his seat immediately or be removed from the courtroom. And for the first time all morning, the senator realized this judge might not be intimidated. Still, he backed away calmly, because men like Victor Caldwell always believe there's another move left to play. Then the prosecution began. Young prosecutor Marcus Webb stood up, looking like a man trying to hold himself together through pure adrenaline. He was only 28 years old, less than a year into the job. And now he was standing across from one of the most powerful political figures in the country. But to his credit, he stood anyway. And what he revealed next stunned the courtroom. According to witnesses, Natalie Caldwell drove her luxury Range Rover directly into a pedestrian-only farmer's market at nearly 40 miles per hour. People screamed. Vendors jumped out of the way. Towels exploded into splinters. Glass shattered across the pavement. One woman suffered a broken wrist. Others were cut by debris. But the most devastating victim was a 71-year-old retired teacher named Dorothy Okafor. Every Saturday, Dorothy sold homemade preserves and baked goods at that market, not for attention, not for luxury, because she loved it. 6 months of work destroyed in seconds. But somehow, it got worse. When Dorothy approached the vehicle afterward, not angrily, but concerned, Natalie exploded. According to witnesses, she screamed that the vendors had no business being in the road. Then she slapped Dorothy across the face. Hard enough to fracture her cheekbone, hard enough to send a 71-year-old woman crashing onto concrete. The courtroom went silent, and then Judge Judy-style karma kicked in. Because while all of this was being described, Natalie Caldwell never even looked up from her phone. No remorse, no emotion, nothing dust her jacket. Perfect hair. 4 expensive defense attorneys surrounding her like bodyguards, and she sat there scrolling as if the entire courtroom existed beneath her. And then Judge Judy noticed something strange. Not once did Natalie look toward Dorothy, not once. That detail mattered because real remorse usually shows itself instinctively, but entitlement. Entitlement avoids eye contact. The defense immediately tried to suppress the video footage recorded by a bystander. Of course they did, because the footage reportedly showed everything clearly, the speeding SUV, the chaos, the assault, and the judge could already see where this was headed, but the real twist was still coming. The court took a short recess, standard procedure, but when prosecutor Marcus Webb returned, something was different. His face had changed. The judge immediately recognized it. This wasn't stress from trial preparation. This was fear, the kind that appears when someone powerful tries to pressure you behind closed doors. The judge leaned forward, then asked one devastating question. Mr. Webb, did anyone approach you during recess regarding this case? The entire courtroom stopped breathing. Marcus hesitated for 4 full seconds. And in a courtroom, 4 seconds can feel like an hour. Then he looked directly at the judge and said yes. Senator Caldwell had approached him in the hallway, and according to Webb, the senator offered him a deal. Dismiss the charges against Natalie, and unrelated prosecutorial problems would magically disappear. In other words, a bribe inside a courthouse during active proceedings, that's when the entire courtroom went silent. The senator's smile disappeared instantly, because now this wasn't about protecting his daughter anymore. Now he had exposed himself. The judge slowly folded her hands. No anger, no theatrics, just certainty. And then she delivered the sentence nobody in that courtroom expected to hear. Officer Reyes placed Senator Caldwell under arrest. You could feel the oxygen leave the room. The senator's aides physically stepped away from him, not toward him. Away. That detail told the whole story, because the second powerful people realize the shield is breaking, survival instincts kick in fast. The senator stood straight while the handcuffs clicked shut, and to his credit, he tried to maintain dignity, but handcuffs erased status very quickly. And every single person in that courtroom understood what they were witnessing. A man who walked in believing he controlled the justice system, being escorted out by it instead. No one looked away. Not one person. And Natalie. For the first time all morning, she finally looked up from her phone, because suddenly the consequences had become real. The judge didn't waste another second. Bail denied. Passport seized. Additional bribery-related charges added to the docket. And that's when Natalie finally broke down crying. Not graceful tears, not remorse. Panic, pure panic. The kind that comes from someone realizing privilege has stopped working. And then the judge delivered the line that destroyed whatever sympathy Natalie had left. You are not crying for Dorothy Okafor. You are crying for yourself. Brutal, but accurate, because accountability feels very different when it finally arrives. By the time sentencing came, the defense had collapsed emotionally. Even the attorneys looked defeated. Natalie Caldwell was found guilty on every count. 2 years in prison, 400 hours of community service at food banks and farmers markets, mandatory psychological evaluation, a handwritten apology to Dorothy, and then came the punishment nobody saw coming. The judge ordered Natalie to record an unscripted public video confession taking full responsibility and release it across her father's political platforms and social media accounts. No script, no PR team, no edits. Just accountability, rah-rah, and public. But the emotional climax of the entire day came from Dorothy Okafor. The elderly teacher slowly stood from the gallery with her arms still in a sling. She walked to the center of the courtroom, and after everything she'd been through, she asked for nothing. No speech, no revenge, no anger. She simply looked at the judge and said, "She saw me." 3 words. That was it. And somehow those 3 words hit harder than every dramatic moment before them, because this case was never really about politics. It wasn't even about the senator. It was about whether ordinary people still matter when powerful people decide they don't. The judge looked back at Dorothy and answered quietly, "You were always visible. This courtroom simply made it official." And for the first time all day, the silence in that room felt peaceful. But the fallout was only beginning. Multiple people recorded the senator being led away in handcuffs. Within hours, the footage exploded online. Millions of views overnight, national headlines, political disaster. And then federal investigators started digging. What they uncovered was staggering: years of corruption, suppressed police reports, financial crimes, political interference, a massive network protecting the Caldwell family for over a decade. Eventually, Senator Victor Caldwell was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. His political career ended in disgrace. And the image that destroyed him forever, that Navy suit, that American flag pin, and those handcuffs. Meanwhile, Dorothy Okafor received hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations after the story went viral. But she didn't retire. She expanded her market business instead, because some people don't want pity. They just want fairness. And Marcus Webb, the terrified young prosecutor, almost got steamrolled by power. He became a senior prosecutor before the year ended, because courage in moments like that changes careers forever. But maybe the most powerful moment came afterward, right after one of the biggest courtroom scandals in years. The judge moved on to the next case, a confused elderly man with a parking violation. She dismissed the fine, wished him a good afternoon, and continued working. Because the law doesn't stop for senators. And it doesn't stop for anybody else either. That's the entire point. If this story reminded you why accountability matters, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications for more courtroom stories just like this. And tell me in the comments, do you think Senator Caldwell genuinely believed he could control the courtroom, or had people protected him for so long that he forgot consequences even existed? And remember, the law only means something when it applies to everyone. Nobody is above it.